Hello, everybody. We're very, very honored today to have with us a real man of men, Mr. Scott Ritter. And this guy knows a thing or two about what in the world is going on, has gone on when it comes to geopolitics, war, and peace. And Scott, thanks so much for being here. And also on October 26th, Scott Ritter is going to be down at Poughkeepsie, not far from here, and we're going to be doing a book signing of his new book that he'll be talking about as well. Hello, Scott.
Hello, how are you?
Well, I'm all right, but the world is really messed up, and it makes me very sad. And of course, the one of the most important things to talk about. You go back to February 22nd. The cover of our Trends Journal magazine. It was 2 days before Russia went into Ukraine. From COVID war to Ukraine war to World War. And I believe World War III has started. And what they're calling a proxy war to me, with the United States and NATO continuing to send billions and billions and countless billions of dollars of weapons to keep bloodying the killing fields and expanding the Ukraine war, is not a proxy war. We're at war with Russia. So, of course, the big news of the last few days was this past Saturday. They bombed out the bridge that connected Crimea with Russia, and Putin called that, quote, an act of terror. As we used to say in the Bronx, payback's a bitch. And now Russia, its bombs away over Ukraine. So what do you see going on, and what's your analysis?
Well, I mean, the facts are the facts. This war would have been over a long time. This war didn't need to be fought. I think we just need to put that straight up. This is a war that actually began, back in 2014 with the Maidan coup or revolution, depending which side you're on. There's different terms, et cetera. But the bottom line is a legally elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, was overthrown using unconstitutional means. And these unconstitutional means were supported by the United States, by the European Union, and others. And the government that emerged in the aftermath of this coup had a decidedly anti-Russian bent. That's one thing if a government wants to have government-to-government problems. But Ukraine is a nation that has a significant Russian population. And these ultra-nationalists who seized power were vehemently anti-Russian. And this anti-Russian posture was acted out violently. The events in Odessa in May of 2014, where 84 people were burned to death by these ultranationalists, the assault on Mariupol, the murder, rape, torture of hundreds, if not thousands, of ethnic Russians by these Ukrainian ultranationalists, all led to a situation where many ethnic Russians in the Donbass and in Crimea said, we don't want to be a part of this. Crimea, of course, declared its independence and was annexed into Russia. The Donbass declared their independence, but Vladimir Putin said, no, you're part of Ukraine. We're going to work out a peaceful resolution to this. They implemented, or they negotiated something called the Minsk Accords in 2015. Germany and France were party to it. Ukraine signed on to it. Russia was an observer. And the idea is that Ukraine would put in place certain legal guarantees of autonomy for the Russians that protected their language, their culture, their history. But this Donbass would remain part of Ukraine. But as we heard from the Ukrainian President Poroshenko, this was a sham all along. Ukraine never intended to do this. They just were buying time to build up a NATO-trained army that would forcefully take control of the Donbass and possibly Crimea. And for 8 years, there was, conflict. 14,000 people died. That's significant. So this war has been going on for some time. The current phase of the war, which began on February 24th, could have been avoided had NATO said, we have no interest in bringing Ukraine into our ranks. If Ukraine had said, we'll seek neutrality, there were any, all Ukraine had to do is agree to the Minsk Accords. But none of that happened. The Russians invaded, and here we are today, 8 months later. And this is a tragedy beyond tragedies, because in the West, I don't think we understand. The closest thing I think Americans could consider to understand what's happening is a civil war where, let's imagine New York was at war with New Jersey. Now, prior to the conflict, New Yorkers and New Jersey, they just intermingled. They listened to Bruce Springsteen. They listened to New York musicians. They got along great. They married each other. Jersey girls were the thing. New York guys were the thing. And man, it was awesome. And suddenly they're at war. And the people you used to party with, the people you used to marry, you can't anymore because you're at war with them. Now, if you're the Russians, let's say Russia's New York and they got to go into New Jersey. Do you go in hard? Do you go in the way you're supposed to go when you go to war? Leveling cities, flattening territory? No, you don't do that because you love these people. They are your people. They belong. You're one and the same. It's bad governments. And so the Russians have gone in a little soft. And in the West, we've misconstrued the Russian softness for being weakness. And we've sought to exploit that by pouring in tens of billions of dollars of military assistance to Ukraine, providing even more money to financially sustain Ukraine. And the end result is this very lengthy conflict that has killed thousands of Russians, tens of thousands of Ukrainians, and America seems to be willing to wage this to the last Ukrainian. Now imagine if you're a Russian and your whole approach to this conflict is to minimize Ukrainian death, and yet you're confronted with the fact that this proxy military, this NATO force, the collective West, is demanding that you wage this conflict to the last Ukrainian. That's like telling a New Yorker, we're going to wage this war to the last New Jerseyan. You have to kill them all to win. This is an impossible situation. Impossible, but it's the one we find ourselves in. The United States and NATO appear to be willing to let this conflict go on as long as possible until the last Ukrainian capable of resisting is either killed, wounded, or captured. So Russia now is confronted with, how do we get out of this? And there's only one way out, and that's victory. But how do you declare victory against New Jersey if you're a New Yorker? You destroy Atlantic City? Do you destroy Trenton? Do you flatten, Mahwah? The answer is no. But you've got to do something. So the Russians now have escalated. They're inflicting damage on Ukrainian infrastructure in an effort to bring the kind of non-lethal pain to Ukraine that might create the genesis for political change so that the Ukrainians can stand up and say, we're not willing to engage in this conflict until the last Ukrainian. But it's an impossible situation. This is one that, history, right now there's a lot of emotions on all sides. And, a lot of these emotions are fear-based, and that fear comes from ignorance. So there's just a whole bunch of people out there that are totally ignorant about the reality of what's taking place in Ukraine. So it's hard to have, an instant history of what's going on. Someday, historians who will be appraised of all the available facts and who will look at things with absolute neutrality will write the history. And hopefully when they write the history, it won't be just about armies moving, politicians speaking. It'll be about the absolute human tragedy that's taking place right now, because that's what this war is. It is literally a human tragedy.
Here is the history before it happens. This is the Trends Journal, spring 2014, when it used to be a quarterly. Of course, now it's a weekly. And this was an article written by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan. Washington is driving the world to the final war. World hegemony is not a right America has earned. And it talks about the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych, Victoria Nuland's speech, the undersecretary under Obama in December 2013, when she brags that we sent $5 billion to non-governmental organizations in Ukraine to teach democracy, and how she was passing out cookies along with the warmonger John McCain in Mariupol, or Maidan, excuse me, and exactly leading up to it. And what people don't remember that we wrote about, here's a photo. I don't know if you could see it. It was the Sochi Olympics that was also going on in February 2014, and how the American media taught the people to hate the Russians and not go to the Olympics. Security expert, it's not if, but when for Sochi Olympics terror attack. Veteran security consultant, veteran piece of garbage, Bill Rathborn, hopes that he's wrong about the upcoming Winter Olympics in Russia. But he has more than a hunch that he's not. Quote, the security threat is higher than it's ever been in the history of the Olympic Games, Rathborn told Yahoo News. Quote, in my opinion, it's not a matter of whether there will be some incident, it's a matter of how bad it's going to be. So they set the whole thing up. They taught the people to hate the Russians, and then the overthrow of the Yanukovych government. So now what we're hearing, again, I want to just mention this to you about the propaganda here. When they blew up the bridge, this was the headline of the New York Times on Sunday, after they blew it up on Saturday. Blast on Crimea bridge disrupts supply route. A major blow to Putin. Wall Street Journal, they don't publish on Sunday, but this is Monday's. Russia moves to repair bridge to Crimea after attack. Oh, like it was no big deal.
Yeah.
But here is the headline after Russia retaliates. As we used to say in the Bronx, payback's a bitch. Russia unleashes a deadly barrage against civilians. It wasn't a deadly barrage that they launched against Russia that killed, an estimated between 5 to 15 people, and destroyed the bridge. That wasn't a deadly attack. All that was Russia moves to repair bridge.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, again, to put it in a context, I drive over what used to be called the Tappan Zee Bridge. I think it's called the Mario Cuomo Bridge now. I drive that bridge all the time. It's a beautiful bridge. It's a wonderful piece of infrastructure. It's a critical piece of infrastructure that connects, upstate with New York City. Thank you, Andrew Cuomo, for building the bridge. But what would happen if somebody blew that bridge up? What would the headlines be in the United States? Major terrorist attack against the bridge. People died. Commerce disrupted. Unprecedented attack against a civilian target. That would be the headline. And then when we retaliate, as we would do, the United States begins, a measured retaliation against a dangerous foe. Things of that nature. Hey, America, what happened in Crimea was a terrorist action. It was a terrorist attack. And the people who carried it out are terrorists. And the people that sponsored it are sponsors of terrorists. And guess what? The people that carried it out are the Ukrainian intelligence service. That makes them a terrorist organization. And they operated on the orders of the Ukrainian government. That makes them a state sponsor of terror. But hey, don't take my word for it. Take the New York Times, which talked about an earlier terrorist attack, the assassination of Daria Dugina, the daughter of Alexander Dugin, a Russian philosopher, not a combatant, not somebody who's in the government, not somebody who makes orders, a philosopher. You don't have to agree with him, but you don't get to kill him because he says things you don't agree with. They tried to kill him, missed, got his daughter. The assassination list that her name was on, I'm on that list, by the way, published her photograph with a red line, said liquidated. It is a hit list. And the New York Times has come out and said that The CIA has, concluded that this was carried out by the Ukrainian intelligence service under the orders of Zelensky. Now, all you have to do is look up US code to understand what terrorism is. The assassination of a journalist is an act of terror. So it's the CIA that says